Some people spend their whole lives trying to prove they're worthy of love. Others quietly become a one small act at a time until someone finally notices. This is a story about a man who never asked to be seen and a woman who couldn't look away. If you've ever believed that the quietest hearts carry the deepest stories, stay with us. Elena Voss moved through the world the way most people move through airports, with purpose, speed, and a vague sense of irritation at anyone who slowed her down. The supermarket was no different. It was Tuesday, just past 7 in the evening, and she had exactly 12 minutes before her next conference call with Singapore. She ducked into the high-end grocery store near her office because her assistant had forgotten to stock the refrigerator in her penthouse. And Elena had realized that morning she'd been surviving on black coffee and catered meeting food for 3 days straight. Her phone was pressed to her ear as she navigated the produce section. A board member was droning on about quarterly projections, and Elena was only half listening, her free hand reaching for a container of pre-cut fruit she wouldn't eat. The margins are tighter than we anticipated, but I think if we reallocate resources from... She didn't see him until it was too late. The collision wasn't dramatic, just a bump of shoulders, her distraction meeting his presence. But it was enough to make her stumble slightly. Enough to pull her attention away from the voice in her ear. "Excuse me," the man said quietly, his hand instinctively reaching out to steady her even as he stepped back. Elena barely glanced at him. She saw the shape of someone in her way-tall worn jacket. A child's hand clutched in his and felt a flash of annoyance that he hadn't been paying attention. "Watch where you're going," she said, her tone clipped and dismissive. She didn't wait for a response. She was already turning away, already refocusing on the call, already moving past him as though he were an obstacle and nothing more. Behind her, she didn't hear an apology or a protest, just silence. What she didn't see was the little girl, no more than 5, looking up at her father with wide eyes. A stuffed rabbit clutched against her chest. The rabbit had fallen during the collision, and the girl had gone very still, watching her father bend down to retrieve it from the polished floor. Daniel Cole picked up the rabbit without a word. He brushed it off gently and handed it back to his daughter Mia, whose small fingers closed around it immediately. She tucked it under her chin and looked up at him, her expression worried in the way children get when they sense tension in the adults around them. "It's okay," Daniel murmured, his voice low and calm. He smoothed the hand over Mia's hair and guided her forward with a gentle touch on her shoulder. "Come on, sweetheart." They moved deeper into the store, and Elena forgot about them entirely. She finished her call near the dairy section, rattled off 3 directives to her assistant via text, and was reaching for a carton of almond milk when she saw them again. They were at the register, the same man, the same little girl. Elena was 2 lanes over, barely paying attention as the cashier scanned her items with mechanical efficiency. But something made her look. The man Daniel, though she didn't know his name, was counting coins. Not bills. Coins. He had them spread out on the counter in small, neat piles, his fingers moving carefully as he double-checked the amount. The items in front of him were sparse: a loaf of bread, a carton of eggs, a gallon of milk, a small box of cereal, a bunch of bananas starting to brown. The cashier, a young woman with a name tag that read Jenna, watched him with thinly veiled impatience. Her fingers drummed against the counter. "That's $12.68, she said, her tone flat. Daniel nodded. He slid the coins forward, then hesitated. His hand went to his pocket, searching. Mia stood beside him, the rabbit still pressed against her chest, her eyes fixed on her father's face. "Daddy," she whispered. "Just a second, Mia." He pulled out a few more coins. Counted again. His jaw tightened. Just slightly a small, almost invisible sign of stress that Elena recognized because she'd built a career on reading people. He was short. Not by much. Maybe $1. Maybe less. The cashier sighed. Elena's hand stilled on her own groceries. She didn't know why she was still watching. She told herself it was none of her business. People had financial troubles all the time. It wasn't her job to solve them. She had a company to run, a reputation to maintain, a life that didn't include standing in supermarkets feeling uncomfortable about strangers counting coins. But she didn't look away. Daniel said something to the cashier, his voice too low for Elena to hear. The woman shook her head. He glanced down at Mia, then back at the groceries. His hand hovered over the cereal box. That was when Mia tugged on his sleeve. "It's okay, Daddy," the little girl said, her voice soft and certain in the way only children can be. "I don't need it." Elena felt something twist in her chest. Daniel's expression didn't change, but his hand dropped from the cereal. He slid it across the counter toward the cashier, who removed it from the total without comment. He counted out the coins again. This time, it was enough. The cashier bagged the remaining items in silence. Daniel took the bag, murmured a thank you that went unacknowledged, and turned to leave. Mia walked beside him, her hand in his, the rabbit tucked under her other arm. She didn't complain. She didn't ask why. She just stayed close to her father, her small shoes squeaking slightly on the linoleum floor. Elena stood frozen as they passed her lane. Daniel didn't look at her, didn't even glance in her direction. He was focused entirely on his daughter, his free hand resting lightly on her shoulder as they walked toward the exit. But Mia looked. Just for a second, the little girl's eyes found Elena's. There was no accusation in them, no judgment. Just a quiet, steady gaze that seemed to see straight through her. Then they were gone. Elena completed her transaction in a daze. She didn't remember walking to her car, didn't remember the drive back to her penthouse. She sat in her living room that night, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city, a glass of wine untouched on the table beside her, and all she could see was a little girl with a stuffed rabbit saying, "I don't need it," so her father wouldn't have to choose. She thought about the way she'd spoken to him. "Watch where you're going," as if he were the problem, as if his existence in her path was an inconvenience she had the right to dismiss. She didn't even know his name, but she couldn't stop thinking about his daughter's eyes. Daniel unlocked the door to the apartment with practiced efficiency, juggling the grocery bag in one arm while Mia held onto his jacket with her free hand. The building was old but well-maintained, the kind of place where neighbors knew each other's names, and the landlord actually fixed things when they broke. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. The apartment was small, a one-bedroom that Daniel had converted into a makeshift two-bedroom by hanging a curtain across half of the living room to give Mia her own space. But it was clean, painfully clean. The kind of clean that spoke of someone who took pride in what little they had. "Can I watch cartoons?" Mia asked as Daniel set the grocery bag on the kitchen counter. "After dinner," he said, already reaching for the pot hanging above the stove. "Go wash your hands." She disappeared into the bathroom without argument, her rabbit tucked under her arm like always. Daniel could hear the water running, hear her humming a song she'd learned at school. The sound made him smile despite the exhaustion pressing against his shoulders. He put water on to boil and unpacked the groceries with careful attention. The bread went in the bin on the counter. The eggs in the refrigerator, arranged neatly in their carton, the milk beside them. The bananas in a bowl that Mia had painted in art class last year, bright yellow with wobbly purple flowers. No cereal. He tried not to think about it. Mac and cheese. That's what they'd have tonight. The box kind. The one that came with the powder packet that turned milk and butter into something Mia thought was the best thing in the world. He had enough for that. Enough for tomorrow's breakfast, too, if he was careful. Mia emerged from the bathroom and climbed into her chair at the small kitchen table, her legs swinging beneath her. She'd already pulled out her coloring book and the half-used box of crayons they'd gotten from the dollar store 3 months ago. "What are you drawing?" Daniel asked as he stirred the pasta. "A house," Mia said, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration as she selected a green crayon, "with a big yard and a dog." "A dog, huh? A small one. So it doesn't eat too much." Daniel's hand paused on the spoon. He glanced at her, but Mia was absorbed in her drawing, filling in careful green lines around a lopsided rectangle that was supposed to be grass. She was 5 years old and already thinking about how much things cost. He turned back to the stove and said nothing. 10 minutes later, he set a bowl of mac and cheese in front of her, steam rising from the pasta in lazy spirals. Mia's face lit up like he'd just served her a 5-star meal. "Thank you, Daddy." "You're welcome, sweetheart." He made himself a smaller portion and sat across from her, watching, as she ate with the uncomplicated joy of a child who didn't know that some kids got steak and potatoes, got fresh vegetables and dessert, got things that came in packages that didn't require boiling water and powdered cheese. "Daddy," she said between bites. "Yeah? Can we get strawberries next time?" He smiled. It didn't quite reach his eyes, but Mia didn't notice. Maybe, he said. We'll see. She accepted this without question and went back to eating. Daniel forced himself to take another bite even though he wasn't particularly hungry. He needed to eat, needed to keep his strength up. 2 jobs required that much of him. After dinner, Mia helped him clear the table, her small hands carrying her bowl to the sink with exaggerated care. He washed the dishes while she returned to her coloring book, and the apartment filled with the comfortable silence of routine. This was their rhythm. This was what safe felt like. At 8 o'clock, he ran her a bath. The tub was old, the porcelain stained in places no amount of scrubbing could fix, but the water ran hot, and Mia didn't care about stains. She played with a plastic cup and a rubber duck that had seen better days, pouring water from one to the other, while Daniel sat on the closed toilet lid, reading her a story from the library book they'd checked out last week. "One more chapter?" she asked when he reached the end. "It's bedtime, Mia. Please." He looked at her wet hair plastered to her forehead, at her pruned fingers clutching the edge of the tub, at her wide eyes full of hope that he'd say yes. "One more," he said. Her grin was worth the extra 15 minutes. By the time she was in her pajamas, hand-me-downs from a neighbor's daughter, faded pink with a unicorn on the front. It was nearly 9. Daniel tucked her into the twin bed that took up most of her curtained-off space, pulling the blanket up to her chin. "Where's Mr. Rabbit?" he asked. She reached under her pillow and pulled out the stuffed animal, hugging it close. Daniel had found it at a thrift store 2 years ago, back when Mia was still learning to sleep through the night without crying for her mother. The rabbit had helped. It still helped. "Good night, Daddy," she whispered. "Good night, sweetheart." He kissed her forehead and stayed there, sitting on the edge of her bed, his hand resting gently on her back until her breathing evened out and she drifted into sleep. Only then did he allow himself to feel the weight of the day. He stood slowly, careful not to wake her, and stepped back into the main room. The apartment felt different at night, quieter, emptier, more honest about what it was. He looked around at the secondhand furniture he'd assembled himself, at the drawings Mia had taped to the refrigerator, at the patched couch he'd found on the curb and cleaned until it was respectable. This was his life. This was what he'd built from the wreckage of everything that came before. He sat down at the kitchen table and opened the notebook he kept in the drawer. Inside were list bills, due dates, amounts owed. He flipped to a clean page and wrote down the numbers from memory. Rent, utilities, daycare, the payment plan for Mia's dental work from 6 months ago. Below that, income. The warehouse job paid weekly. The cleaning job paid bi-weekly. He calculated, recalculated, moved numbers around like puzzle pieces that didn't quite fit. There wasn't much left over. There never was. But they were okay. They had a roof. They had food. Mia had clothes and shoes that fit and books from the library and a father who would do anything to make sure she felt loved. He closed the notebook and rubbed his eyes. Tomorrow he'd be up at 5 for the warehouse. He'd work until 2. Pick Mia up from daycare, bring her home, make her dinner, and then head back out at 7 for the cleaning shift that lasted until midnight. He was tired. God, he was tired. But before he went to bed, he walked to the shelf by the window, the one he'd installed himself, and picked up the photo frame that sat there. It was the only photo he'd kept. Him and Mia. She was barely 6 months old, wrapped in a yellow blanket, her tiny fist curled against his chest. He'd taken it the day he'd signed the adoption papers, the day she'd officially become his. He looked at it for a long moment, his thumb tracing the edge of the frame. "We're okay," he whispered to the empty room. Then he set the photo back on the shelf, turned off the lights, and let the quiet apartment settle into stillness around them. Elena told herself it was coincidence. She told herself that she happened to need groceries again, that the high-end supermarket near her office was simply the most convenient option, that the fact she'd arrived at 7:15 on a Tuesday evening, exactly 1 week after the first time, was nothing more than her schedule aligning with necessity. She almost believed it. The store was less crowded than before. Elena moved through the aisles with her phone in her hand, pretending to review emails while her eyes scanned the space. She didn't know what she was looking for. Or maybe she did, and she just didn't want to admit it. She was near the canned goods when she saw them. The little girl noticed her first. Mia was standing on her tiptoes, trying to see the top shelf where the cereal boxes were arranged. Her father stood beside her, his attention focused on the price tags with the same careful consideration Elena had witnessed last week. "Daddy, can we get the one with the bear?" "Let's see what's on sale, sweetheart." Elena's hand tightened around her phone. She could walk away. Should walk away. This wasn't her business. Wasn't her world. Wasn't anything she needed to involve herself in. But her feet carried her forward anyway. "Excuse me." Daniel turned and Elena saw the exact moment recognition crossed his face. Not anger she'd expected anger, or at least resentment. Instead, there was just wariness, the kind of careful neutrality people developed when they'd learned not to expect much from strangers. "I wanted to apologize," Elena said. The words came out more formal than she'd intended, her boardroom voice creeping in despite her efforts. "For last week, I was rude. I shouldn't have spoken to you that way." Daniel studied her for a moment, and Elena realized she'd never actually looked at him before. Not really. He was probably in his early 30s, with dark hair that needed a cut and eyes that carried the particular exhaustion of someone who worked too hard for too little. There was something steady about him, though. Something quietly resilient. "It's fine," he said finally. "Forgotten." It clearly wasn't fine, but Elena appreciated the grace of the lie. Mia, however, had no such reservations. She stepped forward, tilting her head up to look at Elena with open curiosity. "Are you lost?" the little girl asked. The question was so unexpected, so genuinely innocent, that Elena found herself momentarily speechless. "Mia," Daniel said gently, his hand resting on his daughter's shoulder. "That's not polite." "But she looks lost," Mia insisted, still watching Elena with those wide, serious eyes. "Like when I can't find you at the park?" Elena surprised herself by kneeling down, bringing herself to Mia's eye level. Up close, she could see that the girl's jacket was slightly too big, the sleeves rolled up several times. Her shoes were clean but worn, and Mr. Rabbit, she remembered the rabbit was tucked securely under one arm. "I'm not lost," Elena said softly. "But thank you for checking." Mia smiled, and something in Elena's chest did an odd little flip. "I'm Mia. That's my daddy. His name is Daniel." "Mia," Daniel said again, but there was warmth in his voice now, the kind of gentle exasperation that came from loving someone who had no filter. Elena stood, her eyes meeting Daniel's. "Elena," she offered. "Elena Voss." She saw the moment he recognized the name. Not from their encounter from somewhere else. The newspapers probably, the business section. Forbes. She watched his expression shift, saw a new kind of wariness settle over him. "You're the—" He stopped himself. "You run Voss Industries." "I do." The silence that followed was heavy with things unsaid. Elena could see him recalibrating, reassessing, probably wondering why a billionaire CEO was apologizing to him in a supermarket. "Well," Daniel said carefully, "like I said, it's fine. We should." He glanced down at Mia. "We should finish up here." "Wait." Elena wasn't sure what made her say it. "I know this might sound... I've been thinking about our company's logistics department. We're expanding, and we're looking for people. Day shift positions. Better hours than most warehouse work, and the pay is competitive." Daniel's expression shuddered completely. "I'm not looking for charity." "It's not charity. It's an opportunity." Elena pulled out her phone, typed quickly, and held it out to him. "That's the HR portal. If you're interested, there's an application. No special treatment. Just an option." He didn't take the phone. Just looked at her with those tired, steady eyes. Why? The question was simple and impossibly complicated. "Because I think you'd be good at it," Elena said, which was true enough. "And because I'd like to do something right for once." Mia tugged on her father's sleeve. "Daddy, what's logistics?" The tension broke slightly. Daniel's mouth quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. "It means organizing things, sweetheart. Making sure everything gets where it needs to go." "You're good at that," Mia said with the absolute certainty of a child. "You always find my socks." This time Daniel did smile. Just a little. He looked back at Elena and she saw him considering, weighing options, calculating risks in the same way he'd counted coins at the register. "I'll think about it," he said finally. "That's all I'm asking." Elena started to leave, then paused. She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card, the simple one she kept for actual business, not networking. She held it out. "If you have questions about the position." Daniel took it this time, his fingers careful not to touch hers. He glanced at it briefly, then tucked it into his pocket. "Thank you," he said, and this time he meant it. Mia waved at Elena with her free hand, Mr. Rabbit's paw flopping with the motion. "Bye, Miss Elena." "Goodbye, Mia." Elena watched them walk away, Daniel's hand on his daughter's shoulder, Mia chattering about something Elena couldn't hear, the two of them moving through the store like a complete unit that didn't need anything from the outside world. She stood there longer than necessary, holding a basket with items she didn't remember selecting, feeling something shift inside her that she didn't have a name for. That night, Elena sat in her home office, the city glittering below her windows, and created a job posting. She was careful about it, made it real, made it legitimate. A logistics coordinator position, day shift, salary that would allow a single parent to stop working themselves to death. She didn't mention Daniel's name, didn't flag the application for special treatment. She just opened a door and left it there, unlocked, waiting. Whether he walked through, it was up to him. But as she finalized the posting and sent it to HR, she found herself hoping quietly, cautiously that he would. And maybe, just maybe, Mia would wave at her again. Daniel got the job. He didn't know how exactly. He filled out the application late one night after Mia had gone to sleep, telling himself it was a waste of time, that there were probably hundreds of applicants, that someone like him didn't get opportunities like this. But 3 days later, HR called. They wanted an interview. A week after that, he had an offer letter. The salary was more than both his other jobs combined. The hours were 7 to 30:30, which meant he could drop Mia off at school and pick her up after. Weekends off, health insurance that actually covered things, a benefits package that included dental. He read the offer letter 4 times before he believed it was real. He started on a Monday in late September. The logistics department occupied the third floor of the Voss Industries, building a gleaming structure of glass and steel that made Daniel feel like an imposter the moment he walked through the doors. But the work itself was familiar. Coordinating shipments, managing inventory systems, tracking deliveries. It was what he'd been doing at the warehouse, just with better computers and people who said good morning instead of grunting. He kept his head down, did his work, didn't ask questions about why he'd been hired. Elena told herself she wasn't checking on him, but somehow, 3 weeks after Daniel started, she found herself in the logistics department during a routine operational review that wasn't routine at all. She'd invented a reason to visit something about supply chain optimization, and her VP of operations had looked at her strangely, but hadn't questioned it. She saw Daniel at his desk, focused on his computer screen, a cup of coffee going cold beside him. He wore a button-down shirt that had been ironed carefully, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked different here. More solid somehow. Less worn down. He glanced up as she passed and their eyes met for just a moment. He nodded professional, neutral. She nodded back. That was all, but it was enough to ease something tight in her chest. October arrived with cooler weather and shorter days. Daniel settled into the rhythm of his new life with cautious gratitude. He could afford to buy Mia new shoes when she needed them. Could say yes when she asked for strawberries at the store. Could sleep more than 5 hours a night. Mia noticed the changes too. She asked fewer questions about money. Smiled more. Came home from school with permission slips for field trips that Daniel could actually afford to sign. "We're going to the Science Museum, Daddy," she announced one evening, waving the paper like a flag. "Can I go, please?" Daniel looked at the fee, $15, and didn't have to calculate whether they could manage it. "Of course you can go." Her squeal of delight made everything worth it. At work, Daniel began to recognize patterns. Elena Voss didn't visit the logistics floor often, but when she did, it was never announced. She'd appear quietly, speak with the department manager, review some process or another. She was professional, efficient, distant. But sometimes, when she thought no one was looking, her eyes would find him. He pretended not to notice. It was mid-October when everything shifted. Mia woke up with a fever, not a bad one, but enough that daycare wouldn't take her, enough that she needed to stay home. Daniel had no backup, no family nearby, no network of neighbors who could help. He called in sick, knowing it would use up one of his precious few sick days, knowing it was the only option. But at 10 in the morning, his phone rang. The department manager. Daniel, I know you're out today, but we've got an urgent shipment issue. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't critical. Is there any way? Daniel looked at Mia curled up on the couch, flushed and drowsy, clutching Mr. Rabbit. I can't, he said quietly. I'm sorry. I don't have anyone to watch her. There was a pause. Then, bring her in. What? Bring her in. We've got a break room on the floor. She can rest there. It's not ideal, but if you can spare even a few hours to sort this out, it would help. Daniel's first instinct was to refuse. You didn't bring your sick kid to work. That's how you got fired. That's how you proved you were unreliable. But the manager sounded genuine, and Daniel had seen the shipment schedule. He knew what urgent meant. I'll be there in an hour, he said. He bundled Mia in a blanket, grabbed her favorite books and Mr. Rabbit and drove to the office with his heart in his throat, certain he was making a terrible mistake. The break room was quiet, tucked away in a corner of the third floor. Daniel set Mia up on the couch, made sure she had water and crackers, checked her temperature again. I'll be right down the hall, he told her. If you need me, you tell someone, okay? Okay, Daddy. Her voice was small and tired. He kissed her forehead and forced himself to walk away. The shipment crisis took 2 hours to resolve. The supplier had mixed up addresses, and Daniel had to coordinate rerouting 3 trucks while confirming new delivery windows. He checked on Mia every 20 minutes, finding her exactly where he'd left her, sometimes sleeping, sometimes paging through a picture book with heavy-lidded eyes. He was just finishing the last confirmation email when he heard voices from the break room. His blood went cold. He stood quickly and walked back, expecting to find his manager, expecting to be told this wasn't acceptable, expecting the job offer that seemed too good to be true to evaporate like it had never existed. Instead, he found Elena. She was sitting on the couch beside Mia, who was no longer lying down. The little girl was sitting up, wrapped in her blanket, holding Mr. Rabbit with one hand and pointing at something in a book with the other. And that one's a tiger, Mia was saying, her voice slightly nasal from congestion but animated nonetheless. They're orange with stripes. I see that, Elena said quietly. She was leaning forward slightly, her attention completely focused on the child beside her. Have you ever seen one in real life? At the zoo. Daddy took me for my birthday. That sounds wonderful. Daniel stood frozen in the doorway, unable to process what he was seeing. Elena Voss, Billionaire, CEO, the person whose name made board members nervous, was sitting in her break room reading a children's book about animals with his daughter. Elena looked up and saw him. Something flickered across her face, caught almost, like she'd been discovered doing something she shouldn't. She stood smoothly. Mr. Cole, I was just. She paused. Your daughter mentioned she was bored. Miss Elena knows all the animal names, Mia announced proudly. Daniel couldn't find words. His mind was racing through apologies, explanations, damage control. Elena seemed to understand. Could I speak with you for a moment? She glanced at Mia. I'll be right back. They stepped into the hallway. Daniel's hands were shaking slightly, and he shoved them into his pockets. I'm sorry, he said before Elena could speak. I know I shouldn't have brought her here. The daycare wouldn't take her with the fever, and there was the shipment issue, and I thought I should have just stayed home. I'll make sure it doesn't happen again. Elena held up a hand, stopping him. Daniel, you're not in trouble. He blinked. I'm not. No. She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. Actually, this situation has made me realize we have a gap in our company policies. Parents shouldn't have to choose between their children's health and their job security. I'm going to implement flexible scheduling options for situations exactly like this. Daniel stared at her. You're going to change company policy because my kid got sick. I'm going to change company policy because it's the right thing to do, Elena corrected. Your situation just highlighted something that should have been addressed already. She glanced back toward the break room. How is she feeling? Better than this morning. The fever's coming down. That's good. Elena hesitated, and for the first time since Daniel had met her, she looked uncertain. She's very sweet, Mia. Thank you. She talks about you constantly. Did you know that? In the 10 minutes I was sitting with her, I learned that you make the best pancakes, that you never miss bedtime stories, and that you can fix anything with tape and glue. Despite everything, Daniel felt a small smile tug at his mouth. She exaggerates. I don't think she does. The moment stretched between them, heavy with something neither of them seemed ready to name. Elena broke first, straightening her posture, slipping back into the professional demeanor he'd come to recognize. I should let you get back to work, and I have a meeting in 15 minutes. She started to walk away, then paused. Daniel? Yeah? You're doing a good job. The work. You're good at it. Before he could respond, she was gone, her heels clicking down the hallway with purposeful efficiency. Daniel stood there for a long moment, trying to understand what had just happened. Then he went back to Mia, who immediately wanted to tell him everything Miss Elena had said about elephants. The following week, HR sent out a company-wide memo announcing new flexible scheduling policies and emergency childcare provisions. Daniel read it 3 times. The week after that, he saw Elena in the company courtyard. It was lunch hour, and he'd brought a sandwich from home, planning to eat outside while the weather was still decent. She was sitting alone at one of the metal tables, a salad untouched in front of her phone in her hand. Their eyes met. She looked like she was about to look away, to pretend she hadn't seen him, to maintain the professional distance that made sense for a CEO and an employee. But then she did something that surprised both of them. She gestured to the empty chair across from her. Daniel hesitated only a moment before accepting. They didn't talk much that first time. Just small observations about the weather, the courtyard, nothing of substance. But it was comfortable in a way that felt unexpected. It became a routine, though neither of them planned it that way. 2 or 3 times a week, they'd end up in the courtyard at the same time. The conversations grew longer, more honest. Elena talked about the loneliness of her position, the way people treated her like a title instead of a person. Daniel talked about Mia, about rebuilding a life from nothing, about learning to be enough for someone who deserved everything. Neither of them talked about the fact that these lunches were becoming the best part of their days. Mia started drawing pictures during the quiet hours at home. She'd always been artistic, but now she had a new subject, a tall lady with long hair who knew about animals. Can you give this to Miss Elena? She asked Daniel one evening, holding up a crayon drawing of 3 stick figures, herself, her father, and a woman in a blue dress. Daniel looked at the picture, at the 3 figures holding hands under a scribbly yellow sun. Sure, sweetheart, he said quietly. He gave it to Elena the next day. She looked at it for a long time without speaking, her fingers tracing the edge of the paper. She drew you, Daniel said, pointing to the figure in blue. I see that. Elena's voice was softer than usual. Can I keep it? She made it for you. Elena slipped the drawing carefully into her portfolio. Tell her thank you. Tell her it's perfect. Over the next few weeks, more drawings followed. Mia seemed to produce them at an alarming rate: flowers, rainbows, houses, families. Elena kept every single one. Daniel knew because he saw them one day when she opened her portfolio during lunch. They were tucked in the back, protected by a clear folder arranged in the order she'd received them. She caught him looking and had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. They're good drawings, she said defensively. They are, he agreed, smiling. November brought the first real cold snap. Daniel showed up to work one morning to find a package on his desk. Inside was a winter coat, child-sized, warm, new. The tag was still attached. There was no note. He found Elena in her office on the executive floor, having talked his way past her assistant with some excuse about a shipment question. I can't accept this, he said, holding up the coat. Elena didn't look up from her computer. Accept what? Elena. She finally met his eyes. It's November. Children need warm coats in November. I saw Mia's jacket last week when you brought her to the company party. It was too thin. That doesn't mean. If it makes you feel better, consider it a thank you for all the drawings. She went back to her screen. They brightened my office considerably. Daniel wanted to argue, wanted to maintain some sense of pride, of independence, but he thought about Mia shivering in her too thin jacket, and the words died in his throat. Thank you, he said instead. You're welcome. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Elena? Yes? Why are you doing this? All of it. The job, the policies, the... He gestured with the coat. Why? She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was honest in a way he'd never heard from her. Because you're the first person in 10 years who's looked at me and seen a person instead of a checkbook. Because your daughter waves at me like I matter. Because she stopped, seemed to reconsider. Because I can, and I want to. Daniel nodded slowly. Okay, okay. The smile she gave him was small, but it was real. By late November, their lunches had become a fixed point in both their schedules. Elena found herself leaving meetings early to make sure she didn't miss them. Daniel packed an extra sandwich, started bringing coffee for both of them. They talked about everything and nothing. She told him about her father, about inheriting a company at 25 and learning to be harder than anyone expected. He told her about Mia's mother, about the adoption, about choosing to become a father when the world told him he was too young, too poor, too unprepared. But you did it anyway, Elena said. I did it anyway, Daniel agreed. Best decision I ever made. She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. The words hung between them, simple and true. One Friday in early December, Mia asked if Miss Elena could come to dinner. Daniel had been dreading this question, had known it was coming, had no idea how to answer it. Miss Elena is very busy, sweetheart. But you have lunch with her all the time. That's different. That's work. Mia considered this with the serious expression she got when she was thinking hard about something. Does she have a family? I don't know. Then she should come to ours. You said everyone needs family. Daniel's heart twisted. I did say that. So can you ask her? He looked at his daughter, at her hopeful eyes, at her absolute certainty that the world was kind and that people who were lonely should be invited to dinner. I'll ask, he heard himself say. He asked the following Monday, during lunch, his heart hammering against his ribs like it hadn't since he was a teenager. Mia wants to know if you'd like to come to dinner sometime. At our place. Nothing fancy. He faltered. Just dinner. Elena looked at him for a long moment. Something vulnerable crossed her face, there and gone so quickly he almost missed it. I'd like that, she said quietly. I'd like that very much. They set a date for the following Saturday. Neither of them mentioned that it felt like something more than dinner. Neither of them mentioned that everything was changing, slowly, quietly, in the spaces between words. But they both knew. The dinner was supposed to happen on Saturday. It didn't. On Thursday afternoon, Daniel was called into a meeting with HR and his department manager. The conversation was brief, professional, and left him feeling like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. There had been questions, concerns. Someone from the executive floor had noticed the frequency of his interactions with Ms. Voss. Someone had seen them having lunch. Someone had decided it looked inappropriate. We're not saying you've done anything wrong, the HR representative said, her tone carefully neutral. We just want to make sure all relationships in the workplace remain professional and that there's no appearance of favoritism or, I understand, Daniel cut her off. He didn't want to hear the rest. He left the meeting and went straight back to his desk. He didn't go to the courtyard for lunch. He didn't look for Elena in the hallways. He kept his head down and focused on his work with singular intensity. When his phone buzzed with a text message at 1:15, he already knew who it was. Are you coming to lunch? You. He stared at the message for a full minute before typing back. Can't today. Busy. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Is everything okay? Fine. Just work. He turned his phone face down and didn't look at it again until his shift ended. That evening, after Mia was in bed, Elena called. Daniel stared at his phone, watching it ring, knowing he should answer and knowing he couldn't. He let it go to voicemail. She didn't leave a message. Friday was worse. Daniel heard the whispers in the break room, saw the glances from coworkers who suddenly found him interesting. He caught fragments of conversations that stopped when he walked by, obviously using her. Single dad, what did you expect? Probably why he got hired. Each word was a small cut, precise and painful. He'd known this would happen. Had known from the moment Elena first spoke to him in that supermarket that her world and his didn't mix. That people would make assumptions. That a man like him being noticed by a woman like her would only ever be seen one way. He should have kept his distance from the beginning. At 3:30, he clocked out and drove to pick up Mia. The silence in his car too loud and too empty. Elena didn't understand at first. Daniel had stopped coming to lunch, stopped responding to her messages beyond brief professional replies. When she saw him in the building, he nodded politely and kept walking. She told herself he was busy, that work had gotten hectic, that there was a reasonable explanation. But by Friday evening, sitting alone in her office long after everyone else had gone home, she knew better. She'd heard the whispers too. Her assistant had been careful not to say anything directly, but Elena had built an empire by reading between lines. She knew what people were saying, knew what they thought, and she knew Daniel had heard it too. The realization made her furious, not at him, but at the world that made kindness look like calculation, that made connection look like exploitation, that couldn't imagine a powerful woman and a struggling man being friends without ulterior motives. On Saturday evening, the dinner that wasn't going to happen, Elena made a decision. She drove to Daniel's apartment building, her hands tight on the steering wheel, rehearsing what she'd say and discarding every version as inadequate. She didn't have a plan. She just knew she couldn't let this end in silence. She knocked on his door at 7 o'clock. Daniel opened it, and the look on his face told her he'd been expecting someone else. Maybe no one. His expression shifted through surprise, confusion, and finally settled on something that looked like resignation. Elena, can we talk? He glanced back into the apartment. She could hear Mia's voice, singing something off-key in another room. This isn't a good time. Daniel, please. He hesitated, then stepped into the hallway, pulling the door mostly closed behind him. He crossed his arms, a defensive posture that made Elena's chest ache. What do you want? His voice wasn't unkind, just tired. I want to know why you're avoiding me. I'm not. Don't. She cut him off, sharper than she intended. She took a breath. Don't lie to me. Not after everything. I deserve better than that. Daniel's jaw tightened. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, you heard the rumors. Yes. Then you know why I can't. He stopped, looked away. I have Mia to think about. I have a job that I can't afford to lose. I can't be the guy who's using you, who's trading on your... He made a frustrated gesture. I can't be that person. You're not that person. It doesn't matter what I am. It matters what people think. Since when do you care what people think? Since I have a daughter who needs stability. His voice rose, then immediately dropped again, conscious of Mia inside. Since I clawed my way out of having nothing and I can't go back there. Since... He ran a hand through his hair. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. People like me don't get to be friends with people like you, not without everyone assuming I'm after something. Your money, your influence, your... He shook his head. And maybe they're right to assume it. Maybe I should have said no from the beginning. To the job, to the lunches, to all of it. Do you really believe that? I don't know what I believe anymore. The admission seemed to cost him. All I know is that I can't risk this job. I can't risk Mia's future because I... He stopped himself. Because you what? Daniel looked at her then, really looked at her, and Elena saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Because I care about you, he said quietly. Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being about gratitude or obligation or whatever I told myself it was. Because Mia draws you into every picture of our family. and I don't correct her. Because I think about you when I wake up and before I go to sleep and during every quiet moment in between. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. Daniel. But it doesn't matter. His voice was firm now, resolved. Because I can't be the man who ruins your reputation, who makes people question your judgment. Who? Stop! Elena stepped closer. Close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Stop deciding what I can and can't handle. Stop protecting me from choices I have every right to make. Elena, I don't care what people think, she said, and her voice was shaking now, everything she'd been holding back spilling out. I don't care what they say about me. I've spent my entire adult life being talked about, being judged, being reduced to whatever narrative people find convenient. I'm used to it. But Mia is the kindest, sweetest child I've ever met, and she deserves a father who's happy. Who lets himself have good things? Who doesn't sabotage his own life out of fear? I'm not afraid. Yes, you are. Elena's voice softened. You're terrified of not being enough, of failing her, of wanting something for yourself and having it taken away. Daniel's expression cracked, just slightly. You don't know what it's like to be one bad decision away from losing everything. No, Elena admitted. I don't. But I know what it's like to be alone in a room full of people, to have everything except the one thing that matters. To meet someone who sees you, really sees you, and not know what to do with it. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't care about the whispers. I don't care about the optics. I care about you. About Mia. About the way I feel when I'm with you. Like I'm a person instead of a portfolio. Elena. I'm saying I'm not going anywhere, she said firmly. Unless you explicitly tell me to leave. Unless you look me in the eye and say you don't want this, don't want me in your life. Can you do that? Can you tell me to go? Daniel stared at her, and Elena watched something break inside him. The walls he'd built, the careful distance he'd maintained, the protection he'd wrapped around himself, all of it crumbling in the space between one breath and the next. No, he whispered, I can't. Then don't. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Daniel's shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of him. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. I don't know how to let someone in without being afraid they'll leave. Neither do I, Elena said. But maybe we figure it out together. The apartment door opened. Mia stood there in her pajamas, Mr. Rabbit clutched in one hand, her eyes wide. Miss Elena. She launched herself forward, wrapping her arms around Elena's legs. Did you come for dinner? Daddy said you couldn't come, but I knew you would. Elena looked at Daniel over Mia's head. He was watching them both, his expression raw and open and scared. Is it too late? Elena asked softly. Daniel looked at his daughter, at the woman she was hugging, at the picture they made together in his shabby hallway. No, he said finally. Come in. Elena followed them inside, and the door closed quietly behind her. 4 days passed. Elena didn't come to the logistics floor. Daniel didn't text. The dinner had happened awkward at first, then easier as Mia filled the silences with chatter about school and her latest drawings. Elena had left at 9, thanking them both quietly at the door. She and Daniel had stood there for a moment, neither quite knowing how to end the evening, until Mia had solved the problem by hugging Elena goodnight. But afterward, nothing changed. Daniel went to work. Elena ran her company. They moved through their separate worlds like satellites in different orbits, close enough to feel the pull, but not close enough to touch. Elena told herself she was giving him space. Told herself he needed time to think, to decide, to come to terms with what this could be. But mostly, she was afraid. Afraid that she pushed too hard. Afraid that the truth she'd spoken in that hallway had been too much, too soon. Afraid that Daniel would choose safety over risk, and she'd have no right to blame him. On Wednesday afternoon, she sat in a board meeting and couldn't remember a single word anyone said. On Thursday morning, she stared at her computer screen for 20 minutes without typing anything. By Friday, her assistant asked if she was feeling well. I'm fine, Elena said. She wasn't fine. Friday evening, Daniel picked Mia up from school as usual. She climbed into the car with her backpack and a folder full of papers, chattering about a science project they were starting. We get to build a volcano, Daddy. Can we do it this weekend? Sure, sweetheart. And can Miss Elena help? Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I don't know if she's available. You could ask. Mia, you said she's our friend. Friends help with volcanoes. Daniel glanced at his daughter in the rearview mirror. She was looking out the window, swinging her legs, completely unaware of the weight her words carried. When did I say she's our friend? You didn't have to say it. I can tell. Mia turned to look at him, her expression serious in the way only 5-year-olds could manage. You smile different when you talk about her. I smile different? Yeah, like how you smile at me. The happy kind. Daniel pulled into their parking lot and turned off the car, but he didn't get out. He sat there, his daughter's words echoing in his head. You smile different. That night, after Mia was asleep, Daniel sat at the kitchen table with his phone in his hand. He typed and deleted 6 different messages, none of them capturing what he wanted to say. In the end, he kept it simple. Mia wants to know if you'd like to help us build a volcano tomorrow. He hit send before he could change his mind. The response came 3 minutes later. What time? Saturday morning arrived cold and bright. Daniel had been up since 6, cleaning the apartment with a thoroughness that had more to do with nerves than actual dirt. Mia helped, arranging her stuffed animals on her bed, and making sure Mr. Stuffed Animals on her bed, and making sure Mr. Term Rabbit had a good view of the kitchen where they'd be working. Is everything ready? She asked for the 4th time. Everything's ready. What time is she coming? 10 o'clock. What time is it now? 9:15. Mia groaned dramatically and flopped onto the couch. That's forever. Daniel smiled despite himself. Why don't you practice reading until she gets here? Mia grabbed one of her library books and settled in, but Daniel could see her glancing at the door every few seconds. He understood the feeling. At exactly 10 o'clock, there was a knock. Mia launched herself off the couch and ran to the door before Daniel could stop her. She yanked it open, and there was Elena, dressed in jeans and a soft sweater that made her look younger somehow, more approachable. She held a paper bag in one hand. Miss Elena. Mia threw herself forward for a hug. Elena caught her smoothly, laughing. Hi, Mia. I brought supplies. What kind of supplies? The volcano kind. Elena looked up and met Daniel's eyes over Mia's head. I hope that's okay. I stopped by a craft store. You didn't have to do that, Daniel said. I wanted to. They stood there for a moment, the same awkwardness from the last visit settling over them. Then Mia grabbed Elena's hand and pulled her inside. Come on, Daddy got baking soda and vinegar in everything. The awkwardness dissolved as they worked. Elena spread newspapers over the kitchen table while Daniel gathered the materials. Mia bounced between them, asking questions, offering suggestions, her excitement infectious. They built the volcano slowly, carefully. Cardboard base, papier-mâché sides, paint for the finishing touches. Elena's hands got messy. She didn't seem to mind. Daniel found himself watching her, the way she listened to Mia's instructions with complete seriousness, the way she laughed when the papier-mâché got stuck to her fingers, the way she fit into his small kitchen like she'd always belonged there. Now we have to let it dry, Mia announced after they'd finished painting. Then we can make it explode. How long does it need to dry? Elena asked. Daddy says 2 hours. Elena glanced at her watch, then at Daniel. I can come back later if... Stay, Daniel said. The word came out before he'd planned it. If you want. We could make lunch or something. Elena's expression softened. I'd like that. Lunch was grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup from a can, nothing fancy, nothing that required more skill than Daniel possessed. They ate at the kitchen table with the volcano drying in the corner. And Mia told Elena about every single thing that had happened at school that week. Elena listened to all of it, asked questions, laughed in the right places, looked at Daniel across the table with something in her eyes that made his chest tight. After lunch, Mia wanted to show Elena her room. Daniel watched them disappear behind the curtain, heard Mia's voice explaining the arrangement of her stuffed animals, heard Elena's gentle responses. He cleaned up the lunch dishes and tried not to think about how right this felt, how dangerous that was. When they emerged, Mia was yawning. Someone needs a nap, Daniel observed. I'm not tired, Mia protested, even as she rubbed her eyes. Just a short rest, then we'll test the volcano. Promise. Daniel tucked her into bed, and she was asleep within minutes. Mr. Bice. Rabbit held close. When he came back out, Elena was standing by the window, looking out at the street below. You have a good view, she said without turning. It's not the penthouse. No, it's better. She turned to face him. It's a home. Daniel moved to stand beside her, maintaining a careful distance. Elena, about what you said the other night, you don't have to. Let me finish. He took a breath. I've been thinking about what you said, about being afraid. Daniel, you were right. I am afraid. Afraid of failing Mia. Afraid of not being enough. Afraid that if I let myself want something good, it'll be taken away. He finally looked at her. I've spent 5 years making sure we're safe, making sure we have enough, making sure nothing can hurt us. And then you showed up, and suddenly safe doesn't feel like enough anymore. Elena's eyes were bright. What does feel like enough? This. He gestured around the small apartment. You, here, Mia, happy. The three of us building volcanoes and eating grilled cheese? It terrifies me, but it also feels like the first real thing I've wanted for myself in years. So what do we do? Daniel reached out slowly, giving her time to step back if she wanted. She didn't. His hand found hers, their fingers tangling together. I don't know, he admitted. I don't know how to balance your world and mine. I don't know how to protect Mia from the judgment or the gossip. I don't know how to be enough for you when you could have. Stop. Elena squeezed his hand. I don't want anyone else. I don't want my world without you in it. I want this. I want Saturday mornings and paper volcanoes and your daughter's drawings on my office wall. I want ordinary. I want real. Even if people talk, let them talk. Her voice was fierce now. I've spent my whole life living for other people's approval. I'm done. I choose this. I choose you. Daniel looked at her, at this brilliant, powerful woman standing in his modest apartment, her hand in his, choosing him. Choosing them. Mia's going to draw you into every family picture from now on, he warned. Good. People at work will have opinions. They always do. I can't give you the life you're used to. I don't want the life I'm used to. Elena stepped closer. I want the life I see here, with you, with Mia, with Sunday dinners and school projects and all the ordinary moments that make a family. A family, Daniel repeated softly. If that's what you want. He let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Yeah, that's what I want. Elena smiled, and it transformed her entire face. Then that's what we'll be. From behind the curtain, a small voice called out. Is it time for the volcano yet? They both laughed. Daniel called back. 5 more minutes, sweetheart. Can Miss Elena stay for the whole day? Daniel looked at Elena. She looked back. Yes, he called. She can stay. Elena's hand tightened in his. For the whole day, she murmured. And tomorrow. And the day after that. Is that a promise? That's a promise. That's a promise. When Mia emerged, still sleepy but determined, they tested the volcano together. The eruption was messy and enthusiastic, baking soda and vinegar foam spilling over the sides and across the newspaper. Mia shrieked with delight. Elena laughed. Daniel took a photo with his phone, capturing the moment. Mia in the middle, Elena on one side, him on the other, all of them smiling. Later, after they'd cleaned up the mess, after they'd ordered pizza because none of them felt like cooking, after Mia had fallen asleep on the couch between them, Daniel and Elena sat in the quiet apartment. She had her head on his shoulder. His arm was around her. Mia was curled against Elena's side, breathing softly. This is what I want, Elena whispered. Every day, this. Even the chaos, especially the chaos. Daniel kissed the top of her head. Then it's yours. Outside, the city moved on. People talked or they didn't. Opinions formed or they didn't. Opinions formed or they didn't. The world kept turning. But inside the small apartment, three people had found something that mattered more than any of it. They'd found home. 3 months later, the apartment looked different. Not dramatically. Daniel's furniture was still there. The patched couch and the second-hand table and the shelf he'd installed himself. But now there were other things too. A vase of fresh flowers on the kitchen counter. Elena brought them every week. A second coffee mug in the cabinet, dark blue to match Daniel's worn brown one. A framed photograph on the shelf beside the one of Daniel and baby Mia, the three of them at the park. Mia on Daniel's shoulders, Elena laughing at something just out of frame. Small changes, quiet ones. The kind that meant someone had settled in, not as a guest, but as part of the fabric of daily life. They moved carefully at first, both of them hyper-aware of Mia, of boundaries, of the delicate thing they were building. Elena kept her penthouse. Daniel kept his apartment. But the lines between the two had blurred, softened, until it became normal for Elena to have a toothbrush in Daniel's bathroom, normal for Mia to have pajamas at Elena's place, normal for the three of them to wake up together more mornings than not. The gossip at work had eventually died down, replaced by newer, more interesting speculation about other people's lives. Daniel had stopped flinching when someone mentioned Elena's name. Elena had stopped caring who saw them having lunch in the courtyard. They'd found their rhythm. It was Saturday morning in early March when everything felt different. Not bad different. Just complete. Daniel woke to the smell of pancakes. He lay there for a moment, disoriented, before remembering that Elena had stayed over last night, that she promised Mia they'd make breakfast together while he slept in. He smiled and pulled himself out of bed. The apartment was full of life. Mia sat at the kitchen table in her unicorn pajamas, her hair uncombed, a glass of orange juice in front of her. She was chattering non-stop about something that had happened at recess yesterday, and Elena stood at the stove, spatula in hand, nodding along like Mia's story about the playground slide was the most important thing she'd ever heard. Elena had learned to cook over the past 3 months. Not well exactly, but competently. She could make pancakes without burning them most of the time, could scramble eggs, could follow a recipe if Daniel talked her through it. She wore one of Daniel's old t-shirts and a pair of soft pants, her hair pulled back in a messy knot. No makeup, no jewelry except the simple watch she always wore. She looked nothing like the CEO who commanded boardrooms and closed million-dollar deals. She looked like someone who belonged in his kitchen on a Saturday morning. "Daddy!" Mia spotted him first. "Elena's making the fluffy ones." "I see that." Daniel walked over and pressed a kiss to the top of Mia's head, then moved to stand beside Elena at the stove. "Morning." "Morning." Elena glanced up at him, smiling. "Sleep okay?" "Better than I have in years." It was true. He slept better when she was there, slept deeper, without the constant low-level anxiety that had been his companion for so long. He told her that once, late at night when they couldn't sleep, and she'd admitted the same thing, that she rested easier here, in his small apartment, than she ever had in her penthouse with its security and silence. "These are almost ready," Elena said, flipping the last pancake. "Can you grab the syrup?" They ate breakfast together. The three of them crowded around the small table, and it felt like every other Saturday and like no other Saturday all at once. Ordinary. Perfect. Theirs. "What should we do today?" Elena asked, stealing a bite of pancake from Mia's plate. "Hey!" Mia protested, laughing. "Sorry, yours look better than mine." "The park," Mia announced. "It's warm today. We can go to the park and feed the ducks." Daniel glanced out the window. March sunshine filtered through the glass, weak but present. "It is warm. For March, anyway." "Then the park it is," Elena agreed. An hour later, they were walking through the neighborhood park, Mia skipping ahead with a bag of bread pieces Elena had bought specifically for this purpose. The park wasn't fancy, just a small pond, some benches, a playground that had seen better days. But it was quiet and green, and on a Saturday morning, it felt like their own private space. Mia ran ahead to the pond's edge, scattering bread for the ducks that appeared immediately, quacking their demands for more. Daniel and Elena followed at a slower pace, their hands linked between them. "I've been thinking," Elena said. "About what?" She was quiet for a moment, watching Mia. "About the penthouse. About how I barely go there anymore except to sleep when I have early meetings. Daniel's heart beat a little faster. Yeah? It feels empty. Cold. She turned to look at him. This, what we have it, doesn't fit in that space. It fits here. In your life. In Mia's life. What are you saying? Elena took a breath. I'm saying I think we should find a new place. Together. Something that's ours. Not my world trying to fit into yours or your world trying to stretch to fit mine. Just ours. Daniel stopped walking. Elena, not a mansion, she added quickly. Not a penthouse. Just a home. Something with enough space for all of us. A yard for Mia. A real bedroom for her instead of a curtain. Maybe room for a dog eventually. A small one, Daniel said automatically. So it doesn't eat too much. Elena's eyes softened. She told you that too? 3 months ago, right before you walked into my life and turned everything sideways. Good sideways or bad sideways? The best sideways. Daniel pulled her closer. Are you sure about this? About giving up the penthouse? About, I'm not giving up anything. Elena's voice was firm. I'm choosing something better. I'm choosing a home with you and Mia. I'm choosing Saturday mornings and pancakes and parks. I'm choosing a life that feels real. What about work, the commute? I'll figure it out. That's what cars are for. She smiled. Besides, I've been thinking about cutting back my hours. Delegating more. Being home for dinner instead of working until midnight. You do that? I already am doing it. I left work at 5 yesterday, Daniel. 5 o'clock on a Friday. My assistant nearly fainted. He laughed, pulled her close, pressed his forehead against hers. When did you get so good at this? At what? At knowing what matters. I had a good teacher. She kissed him softly. A man who shows up every day for the people he loves, who makes his daughter pancakes and reads her stories and builds paper volcanoes on Saturday mornings, who taught me that power isn't about how much you control it. About who you choose to love and how you show up for them. Daniel didn't know what to say to that, so he kissed her instead, there in the middle of the park with his daughter feeding ducks 20 feet away in the March sun warming his back. When they pulled apart, Mia was watching them with a knowing smile. Are you being mushy? She called. Maybe a little, Elena called back. Good. That means you love each other. Elena laughed, the sound bright and free. Yes, sweetheart, that's exactly what it means. They spent the rest of the morning at the park. Mia played on the swings, insisting that both of them push her at the same time. They walked the path around the pond, Mia between them, holding both their hands. They sat on a bench and watched other families, other children, other people building their own ordinary, beautiful lives. I used to think love meant sacrifice, Daniel said quietly. His arm around Elena's shoulders, Mia leaning against his side. That being a good father meant giving up everything else. That I didn't deserve anything for myself as long as Mia needed me. And now? Elena asked. Now I think love means partnership. It means letting people in. It means teaching Mia that she deserves to be surrounded by people who care about her, and that I deserve that too. You do deserve it. So do you. Elena rested her head on his shoulder. I used to think power meant being untouchable. That showing vulnerability was weakness. That needing people meant failing. And now? Now I think power means choosing who gets close, choosing who matters, choosing this life over the one everyone expected me to live. Mia stirred against Daniel's side. Can we get ice cream? They looked at each other and smiled. Sure, Daniel said. Let's get ice cream. They walked to the small ice cream shop at the edge of the park, the kind with plastic tables and flavors that hadn't changed in 20 years. Mia got chocolate. Daniel got vanilla. Elena got strawberry and let Mia steal bites from her cone. They sat at one of the wobbly tables, and Mia talked about her new teacher and the book fair at school, and whether they thought a volcano could be made entirely out of ice cream. Probably not, Daniel said. It would melt. But it would be delicious, Elena added. We could try. Mia's eyes lit up. Maybe next weekend, Daniel said. Mia accepted this with a nod and went back to her ice cream, apparently already planning the logistics of an ice cream volcano. Elena reached across the table and took Daniel's hand. He laced their fingers together, his thumb tracing small circles on her skin. This was it, he realized. This was what happiness felt like. Not grand gestures or dramatic moments. Just Saturday afternoons and melting ice cream and a little girl planning impossible projects. Just Elena's hand in his and Mia's laughter and the knowledge that they built something real, something lasting. I love you, he said, quiet enough that only Elena could hear. Her eyes went bright. I love you too. Both of you, Mia announced, apparently possessing superhuman hearing. You love both of us. That's how families work. That's exactly how families work, Elena agreed, her voice thick with emotion. They finished their ice cream and walked home slowly, taking the long way in no hurry to be anywhere but together. The sun was high now, warming the streets, and Mia skipped between them, holding both their hands, singing a song she was making up as she went. When they reached the apartment building, Mia ran ahead to press the elevator button. Daniel and Elena followed, their hands still linked. Thank you, Elena said as they waited. For what? For letting me in, for trusting me with this. With her, with you. Thank you for staying, for choosing us when you could have had anything. This is anything, Elena said simply. This is everything. The elevator arrived. Mia held the door open impatiently. Come on! They stepped inside, the three of them, and rode up together. When they reached Daniel's floor, Mia grabbed both their hands again. Can we watch a movie? She asked. Sure, Daniel said. The one with the singing animals. If that's what you want. And can we make popcorn? Of course. And can we all snuggle on the couch? Daniel looked at Elena. She looked back, smiling. Yes, they said together. Inside the apartment, Mia immediately began arranging pillows and blankets on the couch, while Daniel started the popcorn and Elena queued up the movie. The space filled with familiar sounds, the microwave humming, Mia's voice narrating her pillow arrangement, Elena laughing at something Mia said. This was home, Daniel thought. Not the walls or the furniture or the address. This. These people. These moments. This life they'd built from kindness and courage, and the willingness to believe that good things could last. When everything was ready, they settled onto the couch, Mia in the middle. Daniel on one side, Elena on the other. Mia pulled a blanket over all three of them and snuggled close, her head on Elena's shoulder, her feet on Daniel's lap. The movie started. Animated animals filled the screen, singing about adventure and family and home. But Daniel barely watched it. He was too busy noticing the weight of his daughter against his side, the warmth of Elena's hand finding his across Mia's back. The simple, profound truth that this was enough. More than enough. This was everything. Outside, the world continued its endless motion, but inside this small apartment, three people sat together under a shared blanket, holding each other close, and let the rest of the world fall away. They were home.